So yeah, welcome everyone to another Celo governance call. We're going to have a really packed agenda today, and if for a lot of people who last minute, added like a few discussion items, it's okay if we don't get to it in time. We'll book another governance call for 2 weeks from now if we don't have enough time. But that way, we'll give everyone a fair shot. Let me just pull up the agenda for today. Let's see. Okay. Share screen. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, perfect. All right, cool. So on the agenda, we have a very packed agenda. First, we're gonna talk about the new governance process proposal. Then I'm gonna cover briefly a new repository we're gonna move to, and then we're gonna introduce new CVP editors, and then CVP 33 to 36, I believe, Toby, you're gonna cover it, and then Celo core contracts. I'm not sure if York is here, but if we have time, we'll cover Celo core contracts release 5. And finally, I'm gonna brush up on the governance approver list and what the future of that is. So with that said, who's gonna kick it off? Will, I believe you wanna kick it off, right? Cool.
Yeah, I can go ahead and kick it off. Do you mind opening up that doc?
That's the doc.
All right. Yep, that's right. So we wanted to run through this document that the CGP editors have put together. As mentioned that there's going to be a new repo in GitHub specifically for governance. And so this document will be the documentation in that repo. And the goal of the documentation is to help potential CGP proposal creators understand how to create proposals. So it's not necessarily a general governance participation guide. The target audience is CGP proposal creators. And so this is just a high-level discussion. I want to give a big thanks to Ronan, Elizabeth, and Chris for putting this document together. And then also to Yaz, Martine Volpe, and Amy Slauson for help along the way. Our goal here is just to make everybody familiar with the document, get high-level feedback. We've got some specific questions we want to ask, but then also provide over the next week an opportunity for people to go into the document, comment, read through it, and give us any more detailed feedback that they'd like. And so I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth in a second to give a quick tour of the document. It'll still be really high level. No need to worry about the details. And then I can just run those questions that we have by, and we can take any other feedback that you guys might have.
Cool.
All right, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, so we split this document into a few different slices. You can check out the table of contents on the second or third page. We broke it into a main article where we have an overview of some of the key details about Celo's governance and some of the process roles. So we've got creators.
If you disagree with any.
I think there's a feedback. Whoever is not talking, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Go ahead.
So we've got the main article. We've got some process roles in there, and then we outlined the governance process itself through submission, approval, referendum, and execution. And then we broke down the types of governance proposals all together. So that way you have a document when you hop into GitHub. You have a document of what we're looking for and how to participate and how to submit, most of all. So, some of the key details that we wanted to include are some of the best practices. On page 5, at the bottom, there's a best practices for proposal creators. So here we outlined and have all of the links available for how to participate and how to kind of the best practices in interacting with the community. So posting your ideas on the forum and interacting with the forum, and all of the links to Discord and people on the Twitter community, as well as Telegram. All of our links are there. So that way that can be a good place for proposal creators to go and interact with the community, get feedback on their proposals, and edit them before submitting them on chain. And then on page 7, we outlined those process goals as well. And we also have a really awesome diagram that Chris made about the overall governance process of what that looks like. So we wanted to present it visually for everybody, just to get an overview there. And then on page 8, I think is going to be the best place to look for how governance process actually works through submission, approval, and referendum and execution. And here's where we're looking for feedback from others as well, as we've never gone through this process. As we were writing up the documentation, we haven't actually done the governance process ourselves. So we're looking for people who have done that process to go through, give us some feedback there, and kind of like if we've excluded anything, or if you found some hiccups, or we're looking for any sort of nuance in that direction, that would be really appreciated. And then we started with a technical guide on page 14. That'll be like the nuts and bolts of creating and submitting a proposal on chain, and into the code and how to do that there. So yeah, so primarily we're looking for feedback on kind of with the process, the nuts and bolts, and the bit more of nuance of what we're looking for in there, and in submitting a proposal and parsing it through on chain. Are there any questions so far?
I think before any question, we just want to say thank you all for doing such an awesome job. This looks really cool and like looks pretty like better than anything we had before, and we had nothing before. So props to all of you. Super cool. Anybody has any questions so far? What I think would be the best way forward with this is requesting that everyone on this call and everyone async and stuff to review this document, provide your feedback, comment, anything, like, help it go through the first version. And what will happen after it, we'll finalize that first version with the governance working group, and that will be like the first version of the governance process. And after that, we'll cover what's going to happen after that with the governance repo, but I just wanted to give the floor for anyone to ask any questions about this so far.
And if there are no specific questions, we can scroll back up to the top. We've got a couple quick questions we wanted to run by everybody. They're more just kind of specific questions. The first one is, wanted to get a sense for what the best way to communicate with validators generally is. We're thinking maybe the validators Discord channel, but is there a better place for that?
I can answer that question. Basically, in the validator channel, there's a tag called @validators. So that allows you to ping, I think, the majority of the validators. If any new validator doesn't have that flair, we can add it to them, but that would allow you to ping the majority of the validators, and not restricted to that channel specifically, but that tag will allow you to notify them. And the second way would be if you want to reach out to them, Celo Signal, it's the mailing list that I manage. If you have a specific ask, I'm more than happy to add it to Celo Signal. And third, like, they're very active on Discord, even if you don't add, you tag them and stuff. So there's always like ways to like reach out to them. And then the governance work, the governance call and the all-core dev, generally, like, we try to notify all the validators as well.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to skip over the second question in the interest of time. I'm going to put it in the question list for the technical guide. I want to go to we wanted to get kind of the last thing that we wanted to do on this call is get some volunteers to read through specific parts of this documentation that we feel like we did our best job to put it together, but not having gone through the governance process ourselves, we wanted to get some eyes on it of people that have done it. And so I wanted to see if there's anybody who could volunteer to read through either the types of governance proposals section. This section is the first one that Elizabeth called out. It's one that ideally it's kind of saying, hey, here are the kinds of governance proposals, and here's what to look out for specifically when you put a particular type together. The second section would like somebody to read through is the technical guide section, just because this is kind of like the nuts and bolts of actually like going through the process of putting together or championing a proposal. So we want to make sure that we have that right. And so is there anybody who'd be interested in giving those sections, either one of them or both of them, a read through?
Yeah, I can take a look at the technical section. I've gone through the process 4 times in the last weeks, and yeah,
awesome.
I can take a look.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks. Anybody else want to read through the technical guide section or go through the types of governance proposals section?
It looks like Eric can volunteer as well. I'm happy to also review it again. And I believe there's a few folks from the contract team at CLab who I hope would have like time just to at least briefly review it. Awesome.
Okay, cool. Eric, would you read both sections, or do you have a preference for one of them?
If it's this document that you have, I can just review the whole thing.
Okay, cool. I'll and York, I'll add you as well. All right, thanks a bunch, everybody.
Sweet. Okay. Any question from anyone about the document that was presented? Alrighty. I'll take that as a no, or not yet until we review the document. That's what I'm going to take it as. Okay. So we're going to go back to the agenda. And the new thing that the next action item I want to talk about is very briefly, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but we're going to have a new governance repo. And that's a good thing because currently governance sits in the CIP process repo. And so it's like a little background. The CIP process currently is by, I facilitate the CIP process along with Shane Prestwich. And naturally, if you're an editor for the CIP process, you need some sort of merge right, that other people don't have and stuff. But at the same time, with the governance process and stuff, you'd want it to be, separate and stuff, and separate kind of right for the governance editors and stuff. So I think it made more sense to move governance to its own repo. The other cool thing that can happen later is the document that was shared currently that has been gone over, we'll convert it to Markdown as well. I'm hearing some background noise. If you're not talking, please mute yourself. Appreciate it. We'll convert the document, the first version, to a Markdown, and then future iteration of that document can be done within the Markdown format on this repo. And then I'm going to move all the tickets, all the issue tickets for the governance called the previous one here. So that will be like the historical reference, and all the CPPs will be moved there. It might become a little bit annoying because some of them are previously linked and stuff to in the forums and stuff. But I think the long term it would really pay off. And another thing we want to do is update the template for the CPPs, make it more like a better template. And we would have a website that would be for the CPPs, like a website where people that would auto-generate a website using GitHub. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like cip.celo.org or cpp.celo.org, basically borrowing from the Ethereum code base for the EIP process and their code base. It's really straightforward. It would just convert the GitHub repo to a GitHub page and stuff. But yeah, so I just wanted to cover that. Any questions about the governance repo specifically right now? Okay, I'll take silence to mean nobody has any questions. And let's go briefly over formally introducing the CGP editor. So we got Elizabeth Barnes, Ronan McGovern, me, you know, you're always stuck with me, I feel, but like, and Will Craft, and Chris Wilson. So just give a round of applause to the 4 volunteers. Like they work their asses off, and I think it's a really like good job so far. So. Woo. Awesome. And yeah, any final questions and stuff on the governance? Okay. Alrighty. Now we're gonna go to a CGP like that's been proposed. Let's see. So currently we're 21 minutes into the call. It's a 1 hour call. I feel like we're on good track, depending how the Q&A goes for the rest of the agenda items, in order to cover all of them. Let's hope. All right. So Toby, we're gonna start off with CGP 33. You want to go over it?
Yeah. Thanks, Jess. Let me share my screen.
Okay. Let me just stop sharing mine so you can share yours. And I need to make you a co-host in order for you to share yours. Give me a sec.
Yeah, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go for it. Can you try sharing your screen now?
I need to allow Zoom to share my screen. Wait a second.
Take your time.
All right, I need to quickly quit and restart. Give me 1 minute so the changes are effective.
Cool. Have we settled on what is the best slice of pizza? I felt like that was a really important discussion earlier.
Is this global?
I keep saying it's margarita. Anything with a New York slice is great. All right, Toby's back.
I don't know. I recently had a pizza with a big chunk of burrata on top. It's great.
Fruit pizza. Josh, what is this travesty? Toby, are you back? Can you hear us? Can you see us? Okay. You want to?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me guys too?
Yeah. Loud and
clear. Perfect. Now it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Again, probably.
You want to send the link to Yas and
yeah, we can do that too.
Yeah, send me the link if it's public.
That's easier. I just send it into the chat so you guys can view the slides too.
Okay. Where is that? Oh.
All right. Let me know if you got it yet.
Yeah. Let me share screen. Epoch Rewards. Share. Okay. I'm not gonna make it full screen because I have all the slide. Like,
yeah, that's totally fine.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. All right, hey everyone. So I'm Toby. I'm part of the C-Labs economics team, and we've been looking into Epoch Rewards in the last couple of months and come up with a couple of CGPs, which I like to present now. First, I'm gonna give a quick overview over Epoch Rewards so that everybody understands what we are proposing and what are like kind of the implications of this. 2 of the proposals are like uncontroversial so far. There's been big agreement in the forum, and for 2 other proposals, they got quite controversial in the last week. So I'll present them after the 2 uncontroversial ones. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so why Epoch Rewards? Just quickly, it's to incentivize certain behaviors for Celo, that's staking, validating, community, carbon offset, and stability if needed. Basically, it ensures the security and like the growth and development of the whole network. All right, we can go to the next slide, yeah. The current state of Epoch Rewards is also why we've been looking into it, that the protocol is rewarding ahead of schedule. So in the Genesis block, 600 million Celo have been minted, and there's a target schedule that releases the remaining 400 million Celo over the next 30 years. And the Epoch Rewards mechanism has been over-rewarding quite a bit in the last couple of months, basically in the last year. And the protocol has a built-in algorithm which scales down all Epoch rewards in case of overspending, and also scales them up when the protocol is underspending, such that there's also a lot of Celo to be left to be minted in the future, such that the rewards work in long term. We can go to the next slide. Let's take a quick look at the distribution. What rewards take what share of the overall Epoch rewards? Voting rewards are by far the largest share. It's around 2/3. You can see that in the yellow line in the chart. The next line is the community fund, the green line. That's about 25% of the overall Epoch rewards. And the blue line is the validated rewards. That's less than 10%. And the carbon offset currently is around 1%. So there are like big differences in the share. Next slide, please. What you can see here in the blue line is the downscaling. It's the rewards multiplier. That's basically just multiplied with all target Epoch rewards. That's currently at around 85%. That's the level of downscaling. And the yellow line, that's very cool that this is rising. This is the level of locked Celo, basically the voting fraction, how much people are voting in validated elections to secure the network. And the system is generally working well because they're around 60% of all locked Celo. But we were asking the question, at what point might the downscaling be problematic and bring the protocol into trouble, which is why we've come up with a couple of GCPs. All right, next slide, please. The goal of those 4 CGPs is that they act kind of as a preventive measure, such that the protocol continues to make voting and validating attractive and also continues to ensure the security of the network. And of course, we can't spend infinity Celo. All that is under a budget constraint. And what we reward today, this is not available for rewards tomorrow, which is why the over rewarding right now could be problematic. Next slide. All right, so let me begin with the dynamic adjustment. It's CGP 33. The proposal is to activate the dynamic voting reward rate adjustment, which is currently not activated. The voting reward rate annually, it's around 6%, as many of you know probably right now. It's the target, which is then downscaled to around 5%. And the goal of activating the dynamic voting reward rate is to ensure that users continue to stake with a growing Celo DeFi ecosystem. So when the protocol started, there were not many yield opportunities for Celo. So staking was a pretty good deal to get 6% annually. But with Uberswap and other dApps deploying, they're like growing yield farming opportunities, and this is growing. So the protocol needs to make sure that staking Celo, locking Celo, and voting in validator elections is still attractive in the future. What the dynamic adjustment basically does is there's a target voting reward, target voting fraction, which is right now 50% compared to the actual voting fraction 60%. And there's a feedback loop or relationship between the voting reward and the voting fraction. If the voting reward is high, we expect that more people lock their Celo and the voting fraction increases. And that's also for the other way around. If the voting reward is low, people might unlock their Celo and use it elsewhere. So the voting fraction might decrease. And the dynamic adjustment makes use of that feedback loop, of that relationship. If the voting fraction would be higher than the target, which is the case right now, we have 60% versus 50% target, then it would start to decrease the voting reward rate. And if the voting fraction would be less than the target, such that the security is in danger of the network, if the deviation is large enough, then it would start to increase the reward rate to incentivize people lock up their Celo again. All right. Next slide, please. So my idea was to skip the math here, as everything that happens in the protocol level is on an epoch level, and everything that we think about is basically on an annual level with the years. So the math might not add a lot of use here. If you want to look it up, it's on GitHub, or it's also in the Celo doc, so you can also like write me a DM. The value that we propose is quite small, but it has already quite a big effect. If you look at the chart, first of all, that's not a projection or the reality. That's just like a simple simulation to show what the dynamic adjustment is actually doing. And you can see the value on the chart. It's the voting reward rate, which is currently at 6%. When we look at Epoch 0, that would be today or when the proposal would get activated. And what the different lines say, they represent the development or the propagation of the reward rate dependent on some fixed or constant voting fraction. So you can see it in the legend, the lines, they have fixed voting fractions, 50%, 40%, 60%, and the two extreme cases, 0 and 100%. And that was kind of the logic how we actually chose the adjustment factor. And we wanted to choose it in such a way that if the current numbers would be constant for the whole next year, so 60% actual voting fraction and with a 50% target, the voting reward rate would move by a maximum of 2% in the annualized voting rate. And you can see that the 10% deviation, it's the yellow and the green line. 40 and 60% deviate 10% from a 50% target. And that would be the propagation of the reward rate for the next year. And the red and the purple lines, they're very unrealistic cases. They would basically be the case if the voting fraction would reside at 0% or 100% for the next whole year. And then the maximum change would be 10% after 1 year. So the value is still quite small, but yeah, since it's not been activated, we want to be careful with it. Yep, that's basically it for 33. We can move to 34 in the next slide. And then we thought about, like, while thinking about this dynamic adjustment, we thought about if 50% is still a good value for the voting fraction. It was definitely a good value, I guess, when the protocol started. But one could ask the question, what's the optimal amount of locked sellers? And there have been some voices in the Celo forum that this fraction should be higher. And it also makes sense if the Epoch Rewards can like cope with the higher voting fraction, then this makes the network more secure, basically, because it's harder to take the validator elections over. So we also proposed that in the same way, if we would leave the values as they are right now, the voting reward rate would slowly start to be decreased by the dynamic adjustment. And in order to prevent that, in order to keep the voting rate rather constant for now and for the next years, if the voting fraction doesn't change by too much, we propose to also increase the target to 60%. And what you can see in the chart is basically just the updated numbers. And our line, if the numbers would not change much with 60%, voting fraction would be the blue line. Then the voting reward rate would barely be touched by the dynamic adjustment. Yeah, all right. Yes, we can move to the next slide. This is the Q&A. Since those two have basically been the uncontroversial CGPs of those fours, I'd like to do the Q&A here. If there are any questions, Epoch Rewards, dynamic adjustments, yeah, would be happy for some.
Anyone has any questions about 33 and 34?
Yeah, just has there been any analysis of the, like, is there a change because of this dynamic voting reward, I guess, in the daily issuance of Celo, right? So has there been any kind of look at the ongoing effects of that? Because people are really interested in looking at the rates of inflation of any protocol. So if people see, oh, we've gone up to 8% a day because not enough people are locking gold, then am I thinking of that right, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess you're thinking of it right, if I understand it correctly. But so there's been some analysis of the past year and some projection of the future, but our projections, they base on some pretty heavy assumptions on basically constant locked amounts of Celo, because we don't know anything about the relationship, how the voting fraction will actually behave once the reward rate had started to be adjusted. And what we've seen so far is even with a decreasing voting rate by the overall rewards multiplier, the amount of locked Celo has risen. Yeah, but I guess it's very hard to make any projections how that will actually play out in reality. And the goal of the adjustment factor is rather more to make the system self-evolving, such that it can cope like with different environments and with different voting fractions. If that answers your questions, if I got that correct.
Well, I just noticed on that graph that the voting rewards are by a long way the largest contributor to daily issuance of Celo. So any adjustments to that, even as small as the dynamic voting reward, will have reasonably significant effects on daily inflation of the token, or at least I'm not sure if the supply was already minted at Genesis. I'm not exactly sure, but at least the Celo that's available in the market. So I'm just like wonder if I mean, I know it's difficult to do projections, but I wonder if there could be any runaway kind of effects there, in that you increase the voting reward to try and get more people to vote, and that issues more Celo every day, which might in turn or have a perception of lowering the price, which again reduces demand for the token and so on, that kind of thing. But it's probably too hard to model out. I think the dynamism here is quite small, so yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard to model, but I agree, you're right. So any effects on the voting reward rate, they will directly translate to the dynamic in the daily inflation and then what the overall Epoch Rewards are paying, since it's its biggest share. And that's also basically how the protocol pays for the Epoch Rewards. It's by diluting everyone else, by diluting those people who don't take part in the respective Epoch Rewards mechanism.
I need to interject just because there's a few people raising their hands and we have a limited time. Ronan, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Yaz. Just a quick comment. I guess 33 and 34 won't address the issue that we are currently above the target on emissions, correct, Toby?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's this one case if 34 would pass, no, the other way, 33 would pass and 34 wouldn't pass, then the target would remain at 50%, then the voting rate would start to be adjusted down. Then we would reduce the overall Epoch Rewards. Yeah, but in case both would pass, that's not the case.
Victor, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the voting fraction, and I guess it doesn't seem clear like what is the advantages of being 60%. And I guess I'm curious if there's any analysis that drove the number that chosen there. Not necessarily that. Yeah, basically what kind of thoughts went into choosing that number in particular.
Yeah, so there's no rigorous analysis on how that number is chosen. It was basically just the combination of a couple of personal opinions in the forum and the feeling that the 50% could be higher, but like no rigor behind the 60%.
One last question from the chat, then we have to move on. By Eric, who will be monitoring whether or not the changes 33 plus 34 introduced? Is there an option to roll back changes in case it does not work as intended?
Yes, so we're right now building the monitoring for it such that we can track it on a daily level in the C-Labs economics team. And it's been already partly deployed on the test nets where we actually test quite in detail whether nothing breaks and whether everything works as expected. And I guess to the second question, whether we can roll it back, governance can roll it back. So if we will see that this has any damage to the protocol, then we would have to basically propose 2 new GCPs, which we wrote the parameter changes, I guess.
Okay, cool. Thank you. You want to move on to the next topic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be cool.
All right. Want to kick it off?
All right. Yeah. So now to the 2 more controversial CGPs. We of course also thought about how we would be able to reduce the overall Epoch Rewards. And in the initial forum discussion, there's been agreement that it might be a good idea to reduce the community fund share. So let me begin with our initial reasoning why we proposed that. First of all, I want to emphasize the difference between the Celo community fund, which is run by Deepak and Patrick and Dee, and the on-chain governance community fund. It's a bit ambiguous naming there. The Epoch Rewards, they go to the governance smart contract, and it's basically the governance on-chain community fund. And the Celo community fund from Deepak, Patrick, and Dee, they have an allocation of the governance community fund on chain. That's their relationship. And what's happening in the governance community fund, there's currently 7 million Celo in the fund with a growth rate of approximately like 5.5 million Celo per year. And currently less than 1 million of those Celos are actually allocated and planned to be used. So we thought, why not reduce the growth until more funds are needed again to relieve the pressure on the overall Epoch Rewards. And we came up with this number of 5%. We didn't want to do it to zero, otherwise people would probably forget about it. And this 5% reduction would translate to approximately 1 million Celo growth per year in the on-chain governance community fund. But in the last week, there's been some valid arguments against that, and those are on the next slide. Yes, if you could continue. Yeah, let me start with the arguments against it. And right now, I'm not 100% sure how and if to propose this proposal, as I also think the counter arguments are quite valid. It could send a demotivating message to the community. Funds could be used in the future. I mean, it's probably always good to have a large community fund. The optics, they look a little bad with increasing validator reports and at the same time reducing the community fund rewards. And there's the point. That argument I can't really evaluate because I don't know how governance dynamics typically are on blockchains. But once the community fund share is reduced, the governance proposal can only like increase it again when the funds can be used in the future, and whales might not want to increase it again, or some other dynamic the CGP wouldn't pass. So that's definitely a risk here. Yeah, and right now I'm uncertain on what to do with the CGP. I think it would be a good idea to reduce the overall Epoch Rewards, and community fund is the best option here, I think. And basically the two options I see right now is to propose a lower reduction to only, for example, 50%, or to park it for maybe 9 or 12 months and then revisit it in the future. If there are like more plans to use the funds, or if there's a clearer plan. Because I also think it takes time to actually build the processes in the community to apply for those funds and use them. Yeah, so if there are any opinions, I don't know if we have enough time to have the discussion here, probably not. But there's a forum discussion specifically about CGP 35, and I would appreciate more opinions, especially from the community on that proposal, because in the economics team, we can't really evaluate how that will be received, if it's a good idea to propose or not, because we also don't want to propose anything harmful to the protocol. Yeah, that's about it for 35. Yes, I guess we can move on to the last CGP.
I just want
if you want to say something to it.
I think like maybe, do you think it might be better just to like pause a bit, ask people if they have any questions or like, feedback on this before we move forward? How do you want to proceed?
Yeah, sure. If we have the time, that would be great.
Yeah. Because even if we have other agenda items, we can just book another governance call for 2 weeks from now. So it's fine. Does anybody have any feedback on CGP 35, any opinions and stuff? I've noticed there's some chat and there's been some discussion, but I just wanted to give everyone the floor.
Yeah, I just had a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Whoever was.
Just wanted to add a piece of information. If I remember correctly, the community fund, it's bigger than it should be because it's growing at the same in proportion to the Epoch Rewards that we have been overspending over the last year. So from that perspective, in my opinion, it makes sense to reduce it a little bit to catch up to the original target. So wanted to see what you think.
Ronan? We're going by people who raised their hands.
Yeah, I mean, the big picture tricky thing is that we're overspending. So we obviously need to slow down spending somehow. And that's always a difficult thing. I think you make a very good point, Yaz, on the signaling around reducing community fund and its early days. I guess we'll come to the next part around the validator rewards, but we need to think about having a sustainable system for validators and something that's market dynamic. And I think that's probably, in my mind, something a higher priority to figure out. And then maybe we figure out community fund. That's all I have.
Eric?
Hey, everybody. So I think one of the reasons for kind of targeting the community fund the actual main community fund. I really would like the other project to rename themselves and even donate the domain that they have, because it's super confusing. And we're part of the project, so we know what's going on. And if we can't even be clear on it, I think that's a problem. But back to the actual community fund itself, I think it's being targeted because it's underutilized. And I think it's underutilized because there hasn't been enough people focusing on raising awareness. So I would prefer not touching this, give C Labs, the community, more opportunity to participate before we make these changes. Because I do believe it's like a thing where you reduce it once, it's never coming back, especially as a percentage, right? I think if Celo were to 10x, let's just say theoretically, then you may have dropped it to 5 and maybe you increase it to 6, because relatively it would be about the same amount. So I think we're playing with kind of a dangerous thing here with switching from percentages. But I'd prefer not touching it, actually letting people try to utilize it. And that means like outreach, and the DevRel team on C Labs finally has some headroom to be able to like focus on this stuff. And I think we could help get a lot of awareness to this. But that's my opinion here. I think it's just dangerous to reduce, because then you'll never get it back.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, just to circle back again on Aaron's question. Yeah, so Toby, my personal opinion on the definition, how you defined it, is I think the Celo Community Fund should be the actual name of the on-chain part of the protocol and stuff. Like that is like explicitly what it's meant to be. If we add the word governance and as a keyword, it doesn't really. It kind of, I think, in a word, not necessarily devalue it, but like add it, like words are important here. You know what I mean? And like having this like explicitly always been the Celo Community Fund. On the naming choice by the multisig by Deepak and Patrick, I agree that it should be at least renamed and stuff, at least in the interest of the community and stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't want to call the one that's part of the protocol the governance community fund, because because I think the word governance might just be exclusive, like to people understand governance and stuff, and not necessarily to the entire community. And I think like that keyword matters and stuff. But that's just like, I wanted to give that stuff before, that point before we continue this debate. Anyone else have any more points or questions?
No, just that from the questions here and the discussion that was raised, I think it's clear that it needs a little bit of positive outreach or branding to make it kind of more clear.
Cool. So the other thing, I think Patrick made up a really good point during the forum post, because written to tie it in, I think, with like the point about we want to have sustainable validator reward. At the moment, validators are making a huge profit and stuff. And that's not a bad thing in itself, but like increasing that just to like, because of the validator set side, if you compare it to the mining ecosystem, mining, like your biggest expense is electricity. So as long as you're making a profit, you decrease your your electricity cost, you're making a profit and stuff. And that's like, it's all about like making a profit and stuff. And I think right now, like the cost of running a validator is not that high compared to how much reward per validator is being made and stuff. So I'm not really convinced, and I think Patrick echoed the same thing during the forum post, that from a network security point of view, like it's the most urgent thing and stuff. But I think that ties with the GDP 36 and stuff. The point being though is, it shouldn't increasing the validator reward shouldn't be sacrificing the community fund allocation in order to do that. Even if Celo 10x, 100x, it doesn't really matter from that point of view, because the community fund, philosophically, if you think about it from prosperity for all, and you think about how many people are on Earth, which is about many billions. I forgot the actual number. We haven't hit 9 yet, right? But anyways, that's not the point. You would want like a huge community fund that can do a lot of proposals and stuff, specifically for all the different communities and stuff like that. And the point that I brought up that I think Toby really did a good job of re-echoing and stuff, was the whole thing about, we're such a small network and stuff, and we're just getting started. and there's a lot we can do. And personally, like, what Eric was saying about DevRel and all the different ideas, we have proposals in mind. They're not public yet, but they can be soon if that's like in the interest of utilizing part of the community fund to aggressively make Celo like the premium protocol for any blockchain, like from the blockchain space and also from a community point of view and stuff. Sorry, my calendar. But yeah, I just wanted to add those 2 notes. Anyone has any other points or questions? We got 10 minutes left to the call. And we could probably touch up on CVP 36, but I do want to, give an opportunity for other people to give a question. Ronan, your hand is up. I don't know if it's from before or still. Okay, cool. Anyone else? Okay. I think Ronan brought up a good point about let's move on to the validator stuff because I just, brought it up. But Toby, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. All right. So let's take a look at the last CGP together. It's also, again, one slide with initial reasoning, what I and the team thought of it, and then a second slide with the resistance that came up in the last week with the good counter arguments. So 36 basically proposes to increase the target rewards for validators from like yearly 75K to 85K. And the reasoning behind that was that validators, the downscaling affects validators disappropriately, because if the Celo price would rise and your percentage of Celo that you would receive decreases, then you're overall still profiting from the whole thing. But since validator rewards are fixed, they feel the downscaling like 1-to-1 in their CUSD rewards. Currently, they're getting around 64K per year annualized, and that's further decreasing with the rewards multiplier. The infrastructure requirements, they have been increased once, and they are like supposed to be fairly constant. That's why they're in CUSD, and that was part of the initial reasoning. And we were asking ourselves the question, at what point do validators start to reconsider? And yeah, that's a hard question to answer. And also, I don't have a good idea about the cost structure of validators. And so far, I thought, all right, that this at some point in the future might be a problem. And validator rewards in total, they make less of 10% of the total Epoch rewards. So bumping them by 10% in the validator rewards, it's less than 1% effect on the total Epoch reward. So it doesn't really come at a high cost for the protocol. Yeah, and the proposal basically likes to restore the initial 75K by bumping the target to a little bit higher to 85K. And that will compensate for the increased infrastructure requirements and restore a bit of the stability of the payments that they're supposed to be. Yeah, but then there are good counter arguments, and we can see them on the next slide. Yeah, I start again with the counter arguments that basically said already the arguments that speak for that proposal that I see. There's a high validating demand right now from what I can see. And there are also some voices that validators are still rewarded very attractively, and that the downscaling is not a problem. And it's again, same as in 35, it's bad optics. We want to increase validator rewards and decrease community rewards. It might not send a good message. And there's also been like MEV minor extractable values also come up in the forum, that there might be alternate sources of validator of validator rewards, such that the downscaling of the Celo validator rewards is not really a problem. In my understanding, this is a bit dependent on the community fund reduction, because I would feel uncomfortable increasing the overall Epoch rewards. It would add to the problem, although like only by less than 1%. But I wouldn't feel comfortable proposing it if we would decide to not like propose 35. If that's not a good idea. Yeah, I haven't made my mind up on that one yet.
Do we see a way in we can bundle these proposals together in case we consider it's dangerous for the network that one passes and the other does not?
I was just going to ask the same thing, Bope. Yeah, they feel somewhat distinct, but also somewhat related in that it feels like budgeting, and you kind of want to look at the whole thing holistically.
I would be against bundling because they're 2 separate proposals, even if they have an impact and stuff. I think that two different proposals having two different impacts and stuff on the network, even though they're tied in, like one is dependent on the other. From a proposal point of view, one solved a different problem than the other and stuff.
Yeah, but if you don't like the bundling, you can just vote no and propose the unbundled.
But
Yes.
but you, by creating a bundle, you're incentivizing validator to say yes at the cost of the community, and that's like a really bad optics. And it's worth noting that you are a validator too, Martin. And so it does, like, present that kind of case where by bundling there is a conflict of interest because the validators would propose pushing it forward and at the expense of the community, which doesn't have any validators and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point.
Yeah, I also agree with Yas here that the community should get the chance to vote on those separately, and that it's not our decision like how to bundle them.
Well, but I guess the worst case scenario, because we have the dynamic yield adjustment, right? So if we have the validator rewards scaled up and the community fund not scaled down, it would just gonna hurt Epoch Rewards for voters basically a little bit.
Yeah, and not really by
There's
much. So I
no
wouldn't say-
overspending, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is in any way a risk to the protocol, as it's like less than 1% of the overall Epoch Rewards. I just think it wouldn't look good if we wanted to like propose some CGPs to reduce the overall Epoch Rewards, and if the outcome of all those CGPs is that they are increased independent of the number that they're increased by. Yeah, I don't think that's good optics.
Agree. And I really like your point about some validators complain, obviously, that, oh, the validator rewards aren't, good enough. But like, at the end of the day, validators are service providers, and if they're not happy, they can validate elsewhere and stuff. It's not like this seller's not designed for a validator extractable value. It's not here to enrich the validator. Validators are paid for a service. And if they're not happy with that service being paid, there's other proof of stake networks and stuff. And there's always going to be an incentive for somebody to validate on Celo as long as there's a reward and you can reduce the costs and stuff.
I would just come in there, Yaz. I think it's really important to pay attention to how we reward validators and to be fair and clear with validators around what we expect. And I really don't think us deciding on what a fair rate of 65 or 75, I think it's fine for now, but we've got to move, as I see it, in a priority way towards a more market-based system where we define what performance characteristics we want from the validator network, and then the market sets what the rate is, because we're never going to be able to either agree or define a good price, and that will be seen as fair by validators and by the community. So I would urge us to get on with that discussion of how do we move towards something more dynamic. We're going to want to have a lot more validators in the future as well, so that it's just going to be more important to find out what the market cost is sooner rather than later.
I agree with that, Ronan. I thought about it briefly. Maybe the problem is they're being paid in stablecoin, and I get the reason for that is to incentivize CUSD, but maybe the better alternative to get paid a fixed amount in Celo. And the dynamic approach would be the market decides that value long term. But that is just like a random thought. Victor, you had
I don't see an issue with paying in stables or in Celo. I think it just needs to be dynamic. So it needs to vary. Like they get paid more if we find that there's not enough high quality validation on the network, and then that incentivizes more validators, and conversely.
Yeah, actually, this is part of the point that I wanted to get to, which is that like paying a stablecoin and also having a fixed rate is designed to get high quality independent validators to make it profitable for people who want to make this a very professional operation with high security standards and like really good operations. And having their rewards like going down over time, like not being very stable, doesn't seem like a good way to incentivize long-term focused kind of validators who are interested in and who are looking to run a business in the long term. I don't know.
Yeah,
It seems,
I
and it also
agree.
seems, yeah, and I definitely agree with like stablecoins rather than Celo. And then the other point being like, it seems like what we want is to kind of we are like trying to counteract. We're not actually raising their payout so much as we're just trying to like put it back to what it was, which seems to be like a relatively, I don't know, like most people's arguments I think have not said that they don't want it to be what it was originally. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but basically, if there's any way for us to like change the protocol such that the validator rewards are not subject to the scaling of the Epoch rewards, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah,
and
but
like,
if there's a lot of validator interest, which there is, like there's a ton of queued up validators, the rewards should go down because that means there's more validation available than you know
100%.
than what is happening. So there needs to be some market force.
That decreases it, kind of like Ethereum block reward reduction. Yeah, that's a good point. So unfortunately, I really love the discussion. We're at time. We're 1 minute over time. So Toby, for the controversial one, I'm guessing you're saying because it's still an open-ended question, do you want to revisit them again in 2 weeks? Because we still have other agenda items as well that we're going to do another call in 2 weeks. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure if it would be helpful, sure, but I guess we could also continue the discussion in the forum.
Exactly.
And come to a conclusion there, because I guess there are also a lot of other agenda items for in 2 weeks, so I don't want to take up the time then.
So do you?
But
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Broncos, shouldn't it be, even if it's controversial for the people in the circle and the people on the forum, it shouldn't be proposed anyway and ultimately leave it up to governance?
No, I think like, no matter what the proposal is, there has to be a question about who's going to be voting on it, right? And you put any proposal that's going to improve the conditions for validators without at the expense of the community and leave it up to governance, it's an easy win for validators and stuff. And it should be noted that as a validator, you're incentivized to say that. And I'm not saying that, something to take personally, but like their incentives matter in this game. It's a highly adversarial game. I would, I would really like to see more discussion about those 2 points and stuff, like Toby said on the forum post, and I think we should continue there. I'm going to book a call for 2 weeks from now to continue the other agenda item by York and about the, what do you call it? The approver stage. So with that, thank you everyone. This has been a really amazing governance call, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thanks guys, bye-bye.